March 4th, 1987, the Detroit Pistons, aka Isiah Thomas, Bill Laimbeer, Joe Dumars, and the rest of the bad boys were building their empire. An incredible defensive-minded team that could put anyone in jail. But that night, a 24-year-old Michael Jordan stepped into their house and dropped 61 points without a single three-pointer. No gimmicks, no mercy, just pure dominance inside the arc. Michael wasn't a winner yet. He was simply the best player in the NBA, but he hadn't proven it in the playoffs. The tests he had faced had been very tough, and his supporting cast wasn't up to par yet. But his hunger to win was turning a legendary North Carolina shooting guard into a veritable killing machine, and the Pistons were going to be his next victim. Chuck Daly, the Pistons coach, thought he had everything under control, but that night he was wrong. Because even though Detroit had some of the best defenders in the NBA, including a rookie named Dennis Rodman on the bench, no defense was able to contain this force of nature. This is the story of how the Pistons had to create the Jordan rules and change the best defensive system in the world, just to stop one player. The landscape of the league was completely different in the 1980s. Today, the West is the dominant conference, but back then, the East was littered with powerful teams looking to build a dynasty. The Bulls and Pistons fell into this category. They were contenders looking to take the throne from the Kings, but the shadow of the Boston Celtics was very large. Michael and his Bulls had fallen in the first round of the 1986 playoffs with a bang. The Celtics swept them in 3 games, but Jordan did something almost impossible in that playoff series. He dropped 63 points, the highest scoring total in postseason history to this day, against the best team in the league. Not only that, but he did it against the best player in the league at the time, Larry Bird. What's more, he did it right after returning from what would be the worst injury of his career. Now, the following season had arrived, and he had to prove that it wasn't a fluke. Jordan had shown that he could go off against most teams in the league that season. The man was averaging 37 points per game. So, even though the Bulls weren't great, their star certainly was. However, the opponent awaiting them on that night of March 4th was different. The Pistons were creating a unique play and philosophy based on character, on attitude. Some old heads would even say on violence. It was no wonder. Playing against Detroit meant one thing: your body was going to hurt for the entire week after. What's more, the Pistons weren't just a tough team. They were also extremely talented. Isiah Thomas was one of the best point guards in history, capable of scoring and playmaking at the highest level. Bill Laimbeer had evolved and become a very good scorer after entering the league as a defensive player. In addition, Adrian Dantley and Joe Dumars completed an absolutely devastating perimeter. The Pistons had already laid the foundation for a team destined to dominate the NBA for the next decade. Now, they had to prove it. On March 4th, 1987, people were expecting to see a thrilling game, because the Bulls, who arrived that night at the Pontiac Silverdome in Detroit with a 30-26 record, had passed their era of being a mediocre team. They had improved, and although they had not proven anything in the playoffs, they were already beginning to emerge among the top teams in the Eastern Conference. However, on that date, the Pistons had a much more impressive record of 37-19. Bird was beginning to have problems with his back, and the Detroit players had smelled blood like a hungry shark. Of course, to claim the throne in the East, they first had to get past Jordan, and it all started that night. The tension was palpable in the stadium from the moment the referee tossed the ball into the air. But Michael took a moment to bring it down, not for the Silverdome fans, but for himself. Because when he scored that basket in transition off a pass from John Paxson, he realized he had more than enough confidence to do the impossible. John, in fact, knew what he had to do that night. It didn't take Albert Einstein to figure it out. He had to feed Michael, and he did it again right after a great steal. But the advantage of having Jordan is that he often didn't need an assist, because from the low post, he was capable of anything. On this play, he goes around Joe Dumars to finish with a beautiful reverse layup. Right after that, he hits Joe again with a midi and catch and shoot. And right after that, he attacks again from the low post, this time against Isiah Thomas, and gets past him with his athleticism. Michael was scoring points left and right from the first quarter, and even though Dumars did everything he could to stay in front of him, Jordan was able to use his triple threat to score almost every time. Seeing that their star was on fire, the Bulls tried to find Michael on every play. Paxson continued to make good entry passes that allowed the future legend to score against the toughest defense in the league. But if Jordan had improved in one area during these early seasons, it was as a playmaker. He uses the low post on this occasion to go baseline and return the favor to Dave Corzine, who scores one of the easiest layups of his career. It's not that Mike always needed a pass. He was capable of knocking down completely surreal shots. To cap off an incredible first-half performance, Michael Jordan scored a basket in transition that gave the Bulls a 4-point lead on the board. That was the lead Chicago had after 24 minutes, thanks to MJ scoring 24 points. The only reason they were ahead on the board was because of a legendary performance by their superstar. But at the same time, no one believed that the Bulls would be able to maintain their lead. As soon as Michael ran out of steam, they would be able to win the game easily. Or at least that was the game plan. In the end, they were the better team. But the problem was, that Michael never ran out of steam. Jordan was always waiting for his chance, even after several offensive rebounds. And with his athleticism, that often paid off. Look how he rises up between all the players to make an incredible dunk. Moments later, he gets a bucket off the glass after receiving a pass in the mid-range. And moments later, he gets another tough bucket after a pull-up shot from the mid-range, this time from the other wing. The Pistons had realized the problem. Michael wasn't going to stop that night. Jordan continued to hurt the Pistons' defense every time he received the ball in a low block. His touch from the mid-range was like Midas's that night. And when he couldn't shoot from there, he invented a creative way to finish at the rim. He was just too good. The defenses of the era were unable to predict him. But on top of that, it seemed like the basketball gods were smiling on him that night. I know, it's all about the shooter's touch, but even then you had to have luck. Destiny had to want the ball in the hoop, and Michael was the luckiest man alive that night. Vinnie Johnson experienced what would be one of the worst nights of his career, because Michael was able to react to any counter from the defense. Look at this surreal shot. He's able to score from mid-range using a double clutch from far away from the basket. Unstoppable. On the left wing, exactly the same thing was happening. Michael's threat from the mid-range was so lethal that it allowed him to find space in the paint. Even when the Pistons players decided to help Dumars, Michael was able to score over them. But even so, the offensive brilliance of the Pistons players was able to even the score. Check out this incredible shot by Isiah Thomas over the backboard. However, none of that seemed to matter if Michael kept knocking down shot after shot. Sometimes he didn't even need to put the ball on the floor. He just needed to take a pause to read the defense and then proceed to hurt them. But if there was one play that showed Michael's desire to win that night, it was this ferocious dunk. Look at him go up in the air and suck the gravity out of the Silver Dome. As if that weren't enough, he immediately followed it up with another difficult shot, fading away from mid-range to get a new and one. As clutch time approached, he became more and more lethal. In fact, that basket tied the game for the Bulls with just 3 minutes left to play. The problem was that the game would last more than 48 minutes, because after regulation time, the score was 111 to 111. But we all know that number 23 was an expert in overtime. Right after that, in a play where Chicago needed to score to survive with 20 seconds left on the clock, Michael scored the most incredible basket of the game. With Laimbeer in his face, he was able to knock down the jumper from 20 feet out, a basket that gave Chicago the lead with just seconds left to play. After Isiah missed the shot that gave the Pistons a chance to tie, Jordan grabbed the rebound and was fouled. He went to the free throw line to score his 60th and 61st points of the night. And when overtime ended, the result was definitive. The Bulls were able to overcome the Pistons, thanks to Michael Jordan's 61 points. Because only two other Bulls, Dave Corzine and Sedell Threatt, scored double figures that night. A historic game that those who saw it will never forget. It's true that the Pistons had the last laugh, because despite losing that battle, they won the war. Detroit was able to conquer the NBA twice, and they knocked down the Chicago Bulls 3 times in the playoffs. The Bad Boys went down in history for being able to stop the most dominant superstar who had ever existed. But they couldn't have achieved anything without the creation of the Jordan rules. Michael's 61 points served as a lesson. They realized that they had to be prepared to stop this force of nature on important dates, and that's what they did. However, we all know that he who laughs last laughs best. Chicago was able to break the curse, and the Bulls defeated the Pistons in 1991. That's when Michael was crowned NBA champion for the first time. That's when his legacy began to become legendary. Because even though it may not seem like it, that tough Michigan team that many people hated was what took him to the next level. That's right. Those 61 points he scored on that night in March 1987 were a direct message to the league. If the best defense in the NBA can't stop me, who can? Years later, we know the answer. Absolutely no one. Now, if you were there when it happened, when do you think was that moment Jordan realized it? What day did number 23 really realize he was unstoppable? Drop your pick in the comments. We'd love to hear your story. If you live for legendary breakdowns, epic rivalries, and the moments that made basketball history, subscribe to First 5 Hoops and join a community of real basketball fans. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with all our latest content. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.